Hello everyone and welcome back. Today we're talking about Insecure Season 5, Episode 8, and we only have 2 more episodes left. This had to be my least favorite episode, and I think it's because I just felt very underwhelmed by it. However, the best thing about this episode was Torian. He's a character that has been sprinkled throughout. And my only question is, why wasn't he in the show longer? He really saved this thing. And so the question this episode starts to ask, as we are nearing the end, is where does Issa go from here? Does she move forward, or does she take a giant step back? So the episode opens up with Nathan and Issa. And every time I see them together, especially when I look at Issa, she seems very bored. She seems very underwhelmed by him. And I think Nathan is a good example of what you want versus what you need. Here's a guy who has all the characteristics of a good man, and even looks-wise, he's kind of a dream man. He looks great. Physically, he's incredibly attractive. He's incredibly supportive, but for whatever reason, she's just not vibing with him. And so right at the start of the episode, he kind of lays it out. He says, listen, I really enjoy waking up next to you. I really enjoy making you coffee. And these are things every girl kind of dreams about. You want to hear. And here he is spilling his guts, and he says, why don't we move in together? And she looked like someone peed in her cereal. She was just and again, she doesn't seem too enthusiastic. And what I did like about this episode was the correlation between her career life in terms of what success looks like and her love life, and how they were able to kind of merge those two together. And so we'll start with Issa. So we get to this block party, and her block parties are she found her niche. This is kind of her calling. This is what she's great at. And she's very close to securing these sponsors. In fact, she does, right? And she's having a conversation with one of the guys, and he says, we're going to make you an offer really soon. You're very trusting. We can really rely on you. And she really found a groove, right? She's found a balance. And this block party was really funny, right? They have an interesting way of sprinkling dark humor throughout. That bit about that one woman who comes up to her, thank God for your party. Otherwise I was on my way to a bridge, and I was like, what just happened? That was some dark humor. And then her response was we need to double down on these wellness events. I'm like, no. So I don't know, the humor in every episode, it's still there. I still kind of find myself laughing out loud. And not a lot of shows make you laugh out loud. And so she's there, they're kind of roaming around. And Nathan is there. Nathan is there with his cousin. And it seems like they're on better terms, or they're working on their relationship. And again, you get these words of affirmation. He's like, I love you. She calls herself a power couple. And we'll come back to this idea because Issa wants to be successful, but she also wants to be with someone who's successful. This is very key to her fantasies. And so they take this awkward picture of them pretending to shop. And that was funny because nobody knows how to act natural. If you want someone to act natural, you should just take the picture. So the entire time this block party is going on, I kept thinking, I guess the effects of Crenshaw has worn off. And the reason for that is because he's back down. He shows up to, I guess, give props and make peace. And I thought this was such a weird storyline because it kind of goes against everything that he was saying. I was like, sir, I was rooting for you. He was talking about integrity, how, she made him look bad. And now he's like, what, actually, we can definitely make more money together and also help out the community. And I was looking at him the idea of him is really good, but I don't know. It kind of left a bad taste in my mouth. And I'm not sure why she kind of associated Crenshaw with being more of the community and being more true to herself, because I don't know how true that is. So this was kind of another alternative that she has. So she gets home and she gets the message from these sort of corporate guys hey, we'd like to make you an offer and work with you. And all she sees is dollar signs, right? All she sees is dollar signs, and it shows in her fantasies. And these fantasy scenes, I felt they went on for a little too long. And also they weren't that original. And I'm not really sure if maybe that was the point. You guys let me know. Normally these mirror scenes, they're cute. But for some reason, it was like half the episode, right? Like these fantasies just kept going and going and going and going. And I get it, we can get lost in our own thoughts, but damn, you know, like, like where's this going? But I had to think about it. We'll start with her first fantasy. Essentially, she has two options. She kind of goes the corporate route, or she takes Crenshaw's sort of offer and stays true to herself. And we'll assess that. So the first offer comes through. She's excited. She's been working very hard for this. And she just delves into this deep fantasy. And her fantasies all involve her being materially successful, of course. Like looking great, you know, having nice things, being interviewed, you know, also being recognized as successful, traveling around, and, you know, living in this beautiful house with Nathan. And in this first fantasy, Nathan says that he, you know, has a barber shop, and he apparently it's more successful. Like he kind of mentions cutting, you know, these celebrities and cutting the hair of these celebrities. So again, like she's successful, but she's also with someone who's successful. And the whole fantasy at first I thought was superficial. And I had to think about it, you know. I think in past seasons, Issa has just been kind of going through the grind. But now that success, or like especially material success, is getting closer and closer, you know, it takes so long to get to that point, and it takes 5 seconds to kind of ruin it all. And so she's really kind of like mouth-watering in this fantasy, right? Like she wants the stuff. And I was talking to a friend, like I live in the Middle East, and a friend of mine, we were having a conversation about success, and especially like, I don't know, like what you want your future to look like. And she showed me an Instagram post of like what she considered to be a dream house. And this was really a dream house. Like what she showed me on Instagram, this woman was from Kuwait. She lived in what looked like, I don't even know what. And it was like, okay, the superficial definition of a dream house. But I kept thinking like, girl, if that's your definition of success, like, you know, it's kind of hollow, right? Like success is not only what things look like, but it's also what they feel like to you, right? And as we've seen with Issa, like the more successful she gets, quote unquote, the emptier she seems to feel. And so that fantasy finishes, and she meets with Crenshaw. He sends her a text being like, girl, like, can you make it here? And she's like, what does this man want? And she goes over to him, and his offer was a little bit more realistic. You know, he's talking about opening stores. He wants to help the community, after school programs. And a lot of what he was saying resonated with Issa because these are areas she's familiar with, that she has worked in, and it keeps her in place, right? It keeps her in a familiar bubble. And I think that's why she likes Crenshaw's sort of offer, is because it keeps her home, right? Like for her, this place is home. And the episode did start with her, like she couldn't believe that Tiffany was leaving to Denver, right? Like how could anybody leave home? And I wondered, like, what is it? Where does Issa consider home? Like, and I think for her, it's you know, like where she is now. And so this fantasy with Crenshaw just got out of control, right? It goes from him kind of wanting to show her his ideas to him being like a Yeezy, like Kanye West design. Like the fantasy, again, doesn't involve just her being successful. It involves everybody around her being successful. So now he's a top designer. They're opening stores left and right. And also, like, these stores are right in the community. So people are shopping. She has celebrity status, but within the community. So she's not doing these interviews. And on top of that, she's so successful, and she's done so much, you know, to bring people together, that Tyra Banks, I guess the mayor of this fictitious town, you know, pays tribute to Issa. And I love Tyra. Like, that just made me laugh because it was so unexpected. You know, like, Tyra is just one of those people, like, she has energy, you know? And this fantasy just got out of control. Like, we went from 0 to 100 so fast. And I was like, okay, let's just slow it down. The most interesting thing about this fantasy was how, in the first one, she was living in this beautiful house, this dream house. And in the second one, she's making entrepreneurial sacrifices, right? So if you want to stay in the community, you might not be making as much money. And she's kind of horrified. She's like, we're still living here? You know, it's like she has that push and pull where she wants to move up, but she doesn't want to leave home, right? Like, there is that tension when it comes to success. It's like you want to be able to get out, you know, and make it out, but at the same time, like, you don't want to leave people behind, you know? And so she's in this apartment, and, Nathan, or fantasy Nathan, is telling her somebody has a problem with their toilet, because I guess she's still kind of caretaking the apartment. And she gets the little plunger and she's walking, and Nathan turns into Lawrence, and Lawrence just comes out of nowhere and he starts sweet talking her, and she's like, rah, like, what is this? And I thought it was interesting that Lawrence is there, because Lawrence comes in this fantasy as like being close to home. And I think that's why she still feels like, for her, Lawrence feels like home, you know? And that's because they were in such a long-term relationship. So I did like these fantasies in terms of like where they put Lawrence, right? So if she stays with Crenshaw, you know, she could still be around Lawrence. If she takes this corporate job, you know, and goes off with Nathan, she's a sellout. But I'm not sure why she sees it that way, you know? Like, I think in both instances, you know, everything's a give and take. Watching these fantasies, it's very clear that Issa recognizes Nathan as the smart choice, but maybe not the right choice. I'm not sure, like, what this association with Nathan or Lawrence is. Like, I think with Lawrence, she's projected so much onto him, and you kind of see that in these fantasies, right? That he's no longer like a person. And the thing with Lawrence is that he's very successful now, right? So for her, like, the power couple, like, she feels like she missed out, right? Like, here's a guy who's working at this tech firm, like, he really made it. And here she is still at this apartment, throwing these block parties. Like, I think that's kind of also contributing to her desire to want to hurry up and make it, you know? And when she compares Lawrence to Nathan, I wonder, like, how is she weighing their values, right? Like, why does she really want Lawrence, and what is it about Nathan that she finds so boring, right? Like, why is he not as exciting? Because he's not in tech and he's not making all this money? Like, I don't know. You guys let me know. So before we get to Molly, I just want to talk about the end of the episode. So Nathan and Lawrence get home. They're, you know, they have takeout, they're eating, and, you know, at one point Nathan leaves the screen and he's like, girl, I just want you to be happy. But his voice turned into Lawrence's voice. And she literally froze, like Lawrence was gonna come out of there. So now this image of Lawrence is in her head. And I think she associates like being with him as like a part of her success, right? Like something about Lawrence, like letting him go seems to be a failure, right? And I felt really bad for Nathan, because he just took his food like, girl, are you okay? Like, and he's trying his best, but there's only so much he can do. And so now Lawrence is just lingering in the background, right? He's kind of like this elephant in the room. And I don't think Nathan is aware of how big of a presence Lawrence is in her life mentally, and how he's going to find that out in the next few episodes should be interesting. But this whole conversation about happiness, like, happiness, what is happiness? You know what I mean? Like, these things are so subjective, because people weigh happiness by the feeling, and sometimes people do things that are contrary to their best interest. So in kind of, you know, thinking about Lawrence, it's like you're not really giving Nathan a chance to she's not really letting herself warm up to him, I feel like. And this idea of happiness can be, like, it is important to be happy, but it's also important to weigh out, again, what you need versus what you want. Sometimes the things you want are not the things you need to keep you happy. And that's what she's kind of struggling with at the moment. So now we'll talk about Molly. Molly's storyline is like, I don't know. The best thing about Molly's storyline now is this Torian. And I feel like he saved the episode, because he's so handsome, and I get it. Like, I get his appeal. He's fantastic. And so Molly's drama this episode is like this estate planning. And I did like this conversation they were having with her parents about money. And I like that Kelly was there. And Kelly said something interesting. She's like, you know, when we see our lives on a piece of paper, it can be quite somber, right? So the issue is that Molly has been trying to get her parents to kind of put together a will and sort out their assets before they die. And this is a conversation that's very difficult to have. And a lot of people can't really talk about money, right? Like, money is not something you talk about. And not just in like estate planning, but even salaries, right? It's not appropriate to talk about how much people make, but really these are conversations you should have, right? Like, you would be surprised at the discrepancy between people in the same job, right? And, you know, the reason for that is this, you know, people don't feel comfortable talking about money, and people should be made more comfortable. You should be comfortable talking about money. So this was a nice little conversation. The awkwardness. I liked her father and this, like the contrast between her mom and dad. How her mom was super willing, but her dad was kind of ashamed, right? Like he was like, we spent all our lives working and I have nothing to leave to my kids. Like I'd rather not think about it. And that's the thing with finances, right? These are not things we want to think about. These are not things we really want to break down, because if we see our value according to a number, it can be quite heartbreaking. And so I did like the storyline. I did like Kelly in a more like serious role, and it was fine. And so Molly kind of leaves her parents' house. She has a breakdown, and Torian calls. And I was impressed with Molly for not just going on this date. And I was even more impressed with Torian for sending her wings and wine. I was like, what? If somebody sent me wings and wine to make me feel better, I would like it would just be love at first sight. Like he is just, I think they fit. And I think it makes sense. That's the thing. This is the only love story that doesn't feel forced. I don't know why. Like I don't feel that their chemistry is forced at all. Whereas Nathan and Issa, I just feel like they're really like trying to convince us, you know, and it's like enough's enough. So those are my thoughts. Overall, again, this episode left me feeling, I really had to think about my review for this one. I was like, I had nothing to say, because I think there was what I was expecting out of this episode and what we got. And I don't know how the series is going to end. There's 2 more episodes. So, you know, at this point, it is what it is. We just take it as it is. You know, this is turning into Dexter, you know, like the last season of Dexter. And now they have to do it again because they ended on such a bad note. That's a whole other video. You guys let me know what you think, and until next time.